19 years. That's how long I gave to Virion Tech. I was there before the company had a proper logo, before we had investors, before we even had heating that worked in the winter. I was employee number 5. I remember coding with gloves on, my breath fogging up the corner of the cheap glass window beside my desk. I built the foundation of our proprietary software suite, VOS, Virion Operating System. What started as a basic tool to streamline operations became our flagship product. It was used in dozens of Fortune 500 companies, scaled across multiple industries, and recognized in trade journals. And I built it, piece by piece. I was the guy they called in the middle of the night when the servers crashed. I missed birthdays, vacations, even my father's funeral because there was a rollout to oversee. Not once did I complain. I believed in what we were building. I believed in the team. I believed in integrity. And I believed, foolishly, that loyalty went both ways. That belief shattered the day Jonathan Weir, our new CEO with his Harvard MBA and a jawline sharp enough to slice office politics in half, called me into the newly renovated conference room. He hadn't been with the company more than 8 months, already replaced 3 department heads, downsized the marketing team, and started throwing around buzzwords like lean synergy and reimagine operational functionality. He leaned back in his custom leather chair like he owned the air in the room and looked at me like I was a dusty book on a shelf he never planned to open. "Tom," he said, tapping his Mont Blanc pen against a legal pad. "You've been an asset, but we need to pivot. The board's looking for innovation, disruption, and frankly, your methods are legacy." I blinked. Legacy? You mean the software we still sell to our top clients? He smiled thinly. Yes, but it's outdated, and we're bringing in new blood, a fresh team. That's when he handed me the severance envelope, 19 years of dedication, and all I got was 3 months of pay and a vague offer to stay on as a consultant for transitions. I didn't say anything, not right away. I just looked at the thick walls, the new touchscreens, the polished branding all around the office that I once designed using basic HTML and Photoshop, all of it now slick and soulless. Then I said, "You know, VOS still runs on my personal development license, right?" Jonathan blinked. "Sorry?" I smiled. "I built VOS before you got here. I retained the intellectual property rights under my name in the original DevOps contract. It was cheaper for the company back then. You remember the budget issues. I covered hosting costs and even the license registration myself." He waved a hand. "That was years ago. Legal took care of that." I nodded. "Sure, you might want to double-check that, especially the renewal clause." I walked out of that room with my dignity intact, and an idea. See, when I built VOS, I didn't just make software, I built an ecosystem. I tied every version to a central validation server. Mine. It wasn't for control, it was for protection. In case the company got bought out, or corrupted, or forgot its roots. It took me 72 hours to move my license server to a private cloud. Quietly, legally. I didn't sabotage anything. I just reminded the system that they hadn't paid their license renewal in 6 years. And when the monthly ping hit my server, the response was simple. "License invalid. Please contact your software administrator." Suddenly, every client running VOS started seeing error pop-ups. Systems slowed. Customer service calls flooded the switchboard. Within 48 hours, I got a call. Not from Jonathan. Number he was too proud. It was from Priya, the head of client success. She had been there nearly as long as I had and sounded exhausted. "Tom," she said, "what's going on?" "I think your team should check the license terms," I said. "You'll find an outstanding renewal fee. Also a clause that says I must approve any major update to the core framework." There was a pause, then a quiet, "He didn't know, did he?" "No," I said. "He didn't even ask." Within a week, I was called into arbitration. Their lawyers tried to argue that my ownership was nullified by my employment, but the contracts I'd kept, signed by our original CEO and witnessed by legal, proved otherwise. Not only was I the author, I was the rights holder. They had 2 choices. Pay a lump sum to buy me out, or keep me on a long-term licensing deal with a seat on the board. Jonathan hated both options. He chose the third. He offered me a consulting role again, but with stock options and a direct line to product development. I declined. Instead, I offered my services to our biggest client, who happened to be thinking of building their own platform. They hired me as CTO, and 3 months later, they dropped Virion Tech. Jonathan resigned. The board restructured. And me? I'm building again, not from scratch this time, but with freedom, experience, and a quiet smile every time I get a royalty check. The collapse started like a small crack in glass, subtle, almost invisible. But within weeks of me pulling my software license, the crack became a fault line. Virion Tech's servers, now deprived of the architecture I had maintained for nearly 2 decades, began crashing. Client dashboards went dark. Integration systems failed mid-week during peak usage. And worst of all, the support team, now run by a team of low-cost hires Jonathan had brought in, had no idea how to fix any of it. It was poetic. Jonathan, in his arrogance, had underestimated the foundation I'd laid over 19 years. The system wasn't just software. It was a living organism, one I'd nurtured, adapted, evolved. And now it was fighting back. He tried to recover. He called emergency meetings, issued NDA-laced messages to clients, even tried to replicate parts of the code with freelance developers from overseas, but nothing worked. VIOS, the Virion operating system I had architected, had layers of logic and interconnectivity that only I truly understood. And with the expiration of my contract's intellectual license, they had no legal access to it anymore. That's when the phone calls started. Clients I'd worked with for years began reaching out, not just to vent, but to ask if I had moved on to a new firm. I hadn't announced anything yet, but whispers travel fast. By the time I revealed I'd joined Daxon Corp, one of Virion Tech's former competitors, we had 5 major accounts requesting consultations. Within 3 months, Daxon Corp's market share had doubled. Virion Tech's cut in half. But revenge, I realized, wasn't just about winning back what I'd lost. It was about reasserting the value of respect, for work, for loyalty, for principle. Jonathan, meanwhile, spiraled. The board lost confidence. Investors pulled out. The tech blogs that once wrote glowing pieces about his visionary leadership were now publishing exposés titled, "The CEO Who Fired His Future." The final blow came when one of his own board members leaked a memo admitting the firing was financially motivated, despite my value. I didn't even need to fight them in court. They beat themselves. Still, I had one more card to play. You see, before I was dismissed, I'd made sure to build a private, time-stamped repository, one that tracked the evolution of VOS from inception to release. Every change, every idea, every update had my name in the logs. I even had contracts from the early days where the IP remained co-owned, something Jonathan either forgot or never bothered to read. When their legal team sent me a cease and desist letter, claiming I was reusing proprietary logic, I responded with a 76-page dossier. It was calm, professional, irrefutable, and it ended with just one line. If you'd like to challenge authorship, I'd be happy to let a judge decide. They never replied. Instead, 3 weeks later, I received a settlement offer, 7 figures. Clean, with an NDA clause that I refused unless they also issued a public apology. They agreed. The statement, published on their now-defunct website and several tech outlets, acknowledged my role as the architect of their most successful software suite and confirmed that my licensing rights had not been properly honored. It was the end of Virion Tech and the beginning of my true legacy. Jonathan vanished from the public eye. Rumor had it he tried launching another startup, but no one would invest. Too risky, too arrogant, too burned. As for me, I didn't just rebuild my career, I reinvented it. I was no longer just a behind-the-scenes engineer. I was a keynote speaker, an investor in early-stage tech, and a mentor for underrepresented developers. I taught them not only how to build code, but how to protect what they build. Looking back, Jonathan firing me was the best thing that ever happened. He thought he was cutting costs. He didn't realize he was cutting the cord holding up his entire empire. You don't fire the foundation and expect the building to stand. Not when the blueprint still belongs to me.